Hey everybody, welcome back to Everyday Journey. I'm still working on the mill. So what do I got? First off, I didn't show this because I really don't want to get into the wiring so much because I don't want to get anybody hurt if they try to copy me. But I did put a new end on my cable so that I can plug it in where I typically would plug in my welder. Again, this is 220, so it could easily kill you if you were doing this yourself. But I've put it back together. I've actually got it operational, and I put it back together the way it came to me, or the way that I bought it anyway. And I've run into some issues. So first off, it came with this light, which I thought, hey, that might be useful. And it's mounted to the front right up here at the top. And yes, it does provide some light for you, but it gets in the way of this crank handle for the finer adjust for the quill. Don't really care for that, so it's most likely going to go away. I do have an idea that I've come across that I think might work better for me, and I'll show you guys when it comes, or when I get to that. So the big problem with this right now though is this here. This is the switch. It only has forward. If you wanted to actually get reverse, you'd have to get in there and rewire it so that you got reverse, but then you wouldn't have forward. So it's either or. This is only an on-off switch. It does have a switch on the side here, which, let's see where this is, which operates this cable here, which looks to be, I haven't tested it, but it looks to be wired up so that this would be 110. And I think what that was for is this thing came with a like an air nozzle, something that would pump air, so that I guess you could position it so it would blow the chips away from whatever you were working on. It doesn't work anymore. It hums, but it doesn't really pump out any air, and I don't really see myself needing it. So I'm going to go ahead and get rid of that. So we're going to get rid of the light. We're going to get rid of this cable here, and then this box right here. Somebody fabricated this thing on here, and yes, it does serve a purpose. Maybe it served their purpose, but for me, and most likely this was put on after the worm shaft was broken, because this crank handle here, if I try to crank it, yes, it does go up and down, but it comes within like that far from the box itself. I mean, you actually have to hold the crank with the tips of your finger here, because you can't actually put your whole hand on it because the box gets in the way. That's way too big. That needs to go. So that's what I'm going to work on first. This right here is actually what I got to replace that. As you can see, much smaller. This is more of the type of switch that you would typically see on these type of machines. This one was a cheaper version of what you typically would see. There are brands like Square D and things like that that would give you a much better quality, I think. Although I think the components in here are pretty similar. I did choose this one. There were much cheaper versions. This one was only like $50. I did choose this one because it's more robust. It actually has a metal handle on here, well, a metal handle with a plastic knob, and the casing is all metal. There were some that were plastic, completely plastic, and I just didn't think they were going to hold up as well. And then there were some that were metal like this with a plastic knob, and I knew that there was a good chance that you might have to replace that in the future, and I didn't really want to deal with that. So this one looks to be build quality somewhat good. There were slight issues with it, like when you take this front cover off, it actually, this piece of, it's just bent plate metal over the top of this, and or bent sheet metal, and it's not bent completely the shape that it needs to be. So when you undo these screws here on the either side, this thing wants to spring out. So I don't know if I can bend that a little more myself so that it fits in there better. But once it's actually in there and tighten down the screws, it doesn't matter. It holds at the top and where the screws are. So it really doesn't matter, but I don't really care for it. Just kind of poor quality. They could have done a little better job of that. But what do you expect? Or you pay for cheap, and that's what you get is cheap. So I think this is going to work for me. I just got to figure out a way to mount it. Alright, so here's the way that this one's mounted. If you can see this, let me see if I can zoom in on it. There is a drilled and tapped hole going into the head of this machine, and they've just put a screw in it, and just a machine screw. There's one here, and then there's one a little lower. And what I need to do is actually just take this off of here. I am going to have to leave it wired up because I plan on using this machine to drill my holes and things like that for what I'm going to use to mount this other switch on here. So first I got to take this off of here and kind of set it aside. So my first thing that I don't like about this is that they just cut the head off of a bolt and screwed it in here. That way they could put a nut on the other side, which works perfectly well, except for this is a through hole. It goes all the way through, and so there's nothing for it to tighten up against. Unless those threads grab, you may be just turning the nut on the back side, and it may just try to screw itself in or out of here or whatever, you know. So what I'm going to do is actually take this out. Luckily I've got some 1032 bolts. They are flatheads though, which will work, but we can go ahead and use those in place of the other ones. That way, well, I just like it better. I don't think there's anything on the inside of here for this bolt to screw against, so it doesn't really matter. It seems to just turn all the way in. So that right there should work for what I need. So we'll go ahead and use those instead, and that will work for mounting a plate. Now this thing did have a plate coming off of here, and then had some, look like 3/4 inch square tubing or something similar that was welded to the plate and then came out and just made a big bracket. I'm actually just going to use the hole pattern on the plate to make another plate that's just going to be flat for this switch to mount to. I would use the plate itself that was on there to begin with, but it's not wide enough. Let me show you that. So here's the plate that was on there, and as you can see, the hole pattern on the back of my switch is just a little too wide. So that's just going to turn into scrap. But what I am going to use is my lawnmower blade. This is actually one that, see, you can see right here, that I was doing the test welding on whenever I was trying to weld up this this worm shaft in here. But we can go ahead and use this. I'll probably use this section right up here, so that because the hole is going to be covered anyway, it's not going to matter, but it's all flat and it's all wide enough that it should work just fine. So the dimensions are not that critical on this. I do think that length is going to work. Looks like about 5.5 inches. We need to go ahead and cut that out, and like I said, we're going to cut it out from the middle of this blade, because that's the only place that doesn't have the parts that are actually all sharpened up for mowing. Alright, so now we take our bracket from before, we set it up here. It's a good thing I'm doing it this way because these holes are not drilled into the head straight. So if I do it this way, I can copy the hole pattern they have and hopefully have this thing actually looking like it's meant to be on there correctly. So we just line it up and go ahead and use our center punch or our transfer punch. Give us some holes. Now we're just going to fire this beast up and drill our hole. Alright, let's drill out the other hole. Well, that went a little better, but I still need to lock these down, so that will be one of my first tasks. Let's just get this thing operational first. This is the back side here. We're going to go ahead and just deburr the hole real quick. Then we're going to flip it over and go ahead and drill our countersinks. Alright, so off camera I checked the fit real quick just to see how this was going to work. And of course, since I had a hard time trying to get the holes all lined up right, or keep them lined up anyway, they're just a little bit off, so I'm just going to oversize drill them. I think this is 7/32. That should work. The drill bit's got a lot of wobble to it. Alright, so check the fit and that actually worked, so we're going to go ahead and drill the countersinks. Now there's no reason that this needs to be countersunk at all, except for the fact that that's the only kind of bolts that I have in that size. So we're going to go ahead and do it. Yeah. And that one's actually perfectly flush, so we're good to go on that. Now I got to put it in place and then check where I want to put the other holes for this. I think this right here should work fine. Checking with the quill lock, that seems to clear. Check here with the crank. That seems to clear. So I think that right there will work. Just a matter of marking it. And then we'll take it back off of there and go ahead and drill our other holes to mount this thing. Alright, since I can't get a transfer punch in here because there's obstructions, especially on this other side, I'm going to go ahead and just mark it. They don't have to be perfect. This is not anything that really matters that much. If I get them a little bit off, I can always drill them out a little bit. But we'll mark it and then go ahead and punch it and then go ahead and drill our holes. One more to go and then we'll drill them up higher, or drill them up to a larger size. So since I don't have any parallels, I actually have to move this out further so it clears, so I don't end up hitting this with the drill chuck. And then I don't have any machinist jacks yet, so of course we're just going to have to work with this. But I do want to keep it parallel so that these, well, as close to parallel as I can get it anyway, to make sure that the countersinks actually go in pretty much straight. So let's go ahead and drill those. So if you can see this, all I'm going to do is put the countersink bolts through, go ahead and bolt it down, and then bolt this onto the mill. So that should get us. We'll see what the finished product is. Okay, so it is mounted on there, not permanently yet, but I got two unanticipated problems. But I think I have a workaround for it. First one is this top screw or bolt is actually, this knob right here is in the way, so either you need a ball end Allen wrench to get to it, or a stubby possibly, or you could just sit there and crank it little by little, or you could take this off. I mean, this is just to take this off, just to tighten it up there, and then go ahead and put it back on once it's tight. So that's an easy fix. The other unanticipated problem, and it's a little bit more of an issue, is right down here. If you can see, the bolt that actually, or the screw that actually mounts the cover on here is right up against this. And right now it does, everything bolts up, so it's okay, except for it's going to have a little more space in there once the cover's on there. So that's one of those we'll just wait and see things. I think what's going to end up happening is I'm going to take this all off of here, paint this plate first off, and then put it all back together, and then put my wiring through here, probably wire it while it's off the machine, and then put this bolt down here at the bottom in last. And I think if I have to, I'll go ahead and take a file or something and file down that screw. That way we can make it fit in there, but I think it'll work. So I know you guys saw this. Whenever I was cutting this out, I ended up measuring it wrong and ended up getting part of the blade that was that had already been sharpened for a lawnmower, and I can't leave it that way. So what I ended up doing is I took the divided this width by 2, and then went ahead and drew a diagonal, and wherever that point met, that's where I punched a hole. Then I went and took a compass and actually put it there and adjusted it down to where it met the very edge of this, and then just went ahead and struck an arc there. Did that on all 4 corners. That way I could go ahead and just grind this out. It'll be rounded, but it'll get rid of that, and I just can't leave it that way because it kind of drives me nuts. So we'll go ahead and do that, and then I'll get to getting this thing cleaned up, painted, mounted, and all that stuff. Alright guys, as you can see, no big box on the side of this thing anymore. Turn it like this, we see our elevation crank handle, thanks to my fix, is now working and it's unobstructed. Our quill lock is now unobstructed also, so I can use it. And now we've got power, which you saw that I did have anyway, just trying to use this to be able to make this part. But at the same time, we now have reverse as well. So now I have full functionality with this. So if I ever needed to, I could go ahead and reverse also. And I no longer have to worry about all this stuff in the way. The light is off of it. I'm probably going to put something a lot smaller up here. Although at the moment I really don't need it. But we'll see how it goes. Let's see what I can find. If you have one of these mill drill combos like this, I'd love to see any YouTube channels that you have. I'd love to go watch your videos also, especially on the repairs and or the fixes. If you have one exactly like this, really love to see that too, because I'd like to see what everybody else has done with them, or at least how they came when they were new, because obviously this one is not. So I think one thing I'd like to do in the future is add things to it. Like DRO would be nice, but I don't know if I want to spend the money for that. So I may do some of the same things that a lot of people have done, and use things like the calipers and things like that to be able to make my own in a way. Although some of the cheaper DROs may be an option for this too, but I'd have to figure out how to actually put it on here. So if you got links to that, or know somebody that has things like that, send a description to that to my way so I can look at those, and maybe I'll use those ideas in the future. But for now, I've got something that works, and hopefully I can get started on some projects here soon. So I appreciate you guys watching. You guys take care. I'll see you next time.